This is the second part of what I'm calling firstborn conflict, or conflict set around the firstborn. And in the first part, talked about how everything centers on this issue of firstborn rights. And that has to do with inheritance. It has to do with land. It has to do with everything that pertains to what we're dealing with today, actually. And I see it around the world. I see it in the fights, the wars around the world for Taiwan and mainland China, North Korea, South Korea. Wherever there's a conflict about borders, it usually is focused on who is there first, who has the right, whose right is it? And that's very much the issue you see here in the Middle East with the Arab states and Israel. When we say the Israeli-Arab war, we're talking about more than Israel and the Arabs. We're talking about Islam and Judaism. We're talking about Christianity. We're talking about the three faiths. So in the first part, talked about how things have gotten to this point, and I believe it's a continuation or an extension of the conquest of Joshua, and how God went before Israel. In Deuteronomy 9 says to destroy your enemies, to destroy them before you crossed over, that you would be able to destroy them easily. And if anybody would have said a couple of years ago, like I said, that we would be where we're at today, that Iran would have suffered the defeat it has to the tiny state of Jerusalem, or Israel rather, that Hamas would be in their tunnels and fighting for their survival, that Hezbollah would be where it's at, trying not to give up their weapons to the Lebanese army and becoming a non-issue in Lebanon and on the world stage. But people don't see, I don't believe people see and understand what's really going on when we're listening from different places in the world, just to the news media and what we're hearing about starving children in Gaza, which is a problem, and nobody's looking away from that. And maybe it's not to the extent that we're hearing, but nevertheless, it's an issue that needs to be dealt with. And how that's dealt with, well, it depends on which side of the fence you're on, which side of the issue you're on. And I think it's important to understand, and again, I want to bring up this scripture that Jesus said, if you abide in my word, you will be my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And Pontius Pilate had a really great response to that. And I think he probably heard that this had been said by Yeshua, by Jesus. And he asked him, what is truth? Which he got no answer to. Because the truth must be sought after. We must seek it. We must ask for it. We must humble ourselves before God and pray and turn from our wicked ways. Seek his face. And I believe that when we do follow the path, the journey, the road laid out for us, the way, the truth, the life, when we follow him, when we walk after the Spirit, Romans 8 says, then we will know the truth. It must come that way, and it's not without suffering. But which we're seeing today. You know, Israel has been brought back to the land. And basically, if you look at, again, Ezekiel 36 through 39, it's all laid out. It's the whole framework. You know, the people that have profaned his name, wherever he's cast them out around the world, Ezekiel 36, he brings them back for his great and holy namesake to put a new heart and a new spirit in them. Ezekiel 37, he raises up a great army from the dry bones in the valley. And then there's a war. There's a terrible war, Ezekiel 38, devastating for not only Israel, but for many nations, maybe all nations. The great and terrible day of the Lord that we're warned about. But then in the end, we will know his name. So carrying on with that in mind, I want to go back to the document again and look at, we stopped with the Iranian Constitution, or we looked at the Iranian Constitution. But I want to go back, or I want to continue on with, and we talked about how the Ayatollah was talking about Israel, and they've always talked about Israel as, the cancer in the Middle East that needs to be rooted out. It needs to be cut out. That's the way they look at it. And but I want to go back before that, back to 1948 and before. So the UN plan for the partition of Palestine, the Pan-Arab Committee at the time, this is in 1948, initiated by the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Muhammad Amin al-Husseini, came up with a document, or they came out with a statement. This will be a war of extermination and a momentous massacre which will be spoken of like the Mongolian massacres and the Crusades. Now they're talking about the war that was going to be waged against Israel, that they cannot have a state on this land. And we talked about how there's Dar el-Salam and Dar el-Harb, all the lands that have been given to or conquered by Islam, they belong to Islam forever. They've been given by God. And now Dar el-Salam was the area that Israel's on now, Transjordan or Palestine or whatever it was, Greater Syria. But then in 1948, with the founding of the State of Israel, Dar el-Salam was being cut up into Dar el-Salam, and now with the Jews on the land, it would be Dar el-Harb. So it has to be taken. So Husseini proclaimed, he said, "I declare a holy war, my Muslim brothers, murder the Jews, murder them all." That's what he said. So in 1941, he had met with Adolf Hitler in Germany at this Wannsee conference. And one of the topics of the agenda was the Jewish problem in Europe, and the murder of the Jews had already begun with Hitler's final solution. But al-Husseini believed that Germany would win the war and sought Hitler's assistance to eliminate the Jews from Palestine. Very important, because this has nothing to do with who the Jews were. It doesn't have anything to do with Jewish actions at the time, with what the Jews were doing to the locals, the Palestinians. Jews had Palestinian passports. There were fights. There were disagreements. There was conflict. But what we're going into, or what we're seeing in happening, what unfolded, was al-Husseini's his relationship with the Germans. He was on, it says, he also gave speeches on Radio and said, "Kill the Jews wherever you find them." This finds grace in the eyes of God, history, and religion. So you have this strong Muslim, Islamic persona being set down before and during and after the formation of the State of Israel. And that's why there was an attack. So this is what the Prime Minister of Transjordan had to say. He said, "The problem now at issue is the problem of Palestine and finding a solution there too. The Hashemite kingdom of Jordan should never be implicated in that problem, nor should Transjordan be forced into a union with a Jewish state. And then here's the important part. Our position is clear and has been proclaimed on every occasion. It is never to allow the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine and to exclude partition. Our object is to cooperate with the other Arab states in her deliverance. Once this aim is attained, the determination of her future status is the right and concern of her own people. We have no other object or aim in view. So this agenda has been on the table since before the foundation of the state. It was never to allow a state of Israel. So what we're seeing today in Gaza and with the Iranians and Hezbollah, the party of God, Hezbollah, that this is their issue. It is not the Jewish state in what the Jewish state has done, although there are things that the Jewish state has done since it's become a state that have not been conducive to humanity, to peace. Okay, it's been an ugly fight, and making peace with somebody who's declaring your death from the beginning, that you're a cancer before you're even a nation, is very hard to live with. And I'm sure that just what's come out of that on the Jewish side has been survival. It's a warrior nation. It's been brought back from the nations to be the Valley of Dry Bones, to be a great army. It is a warrior nation. You can see it in other scriptures too, other final days, last days prophecies too. In Joel, in Jeremiah, in Zechariah, it all talks about being at war with the surrounding nations when you come back. So the Islamic agenda, this is the Palestinian National Charter or National Covenant. The liberation of Palestine from an Arab viewpoint is a national duty, and it attempts to repel the Zionist and imperialist aggression against the Arab homeland and aims at the elimination of Zionism in Palestine. Okay, so they see it as Zionism, and so does God, by the way. When he returns the people to Zion. You can find that in Isaiah chapter 2. It must, particularly in the phase of the armed Palestinian revolution, offer and furnish the Palestinian people with all possible help and material support, and make available to them the means and opportunities that will enable them to continue to carry out their leading role in the armed revolution until they liberate their homeland. There hasn't been any other vision or statement from the Palestinians that can be trusted. This is the core. This is why the Iranians and the Islamic Republic of Iran is so set against the state of Israel, why it wants to destroy the state of Israel. You saw the statements from the Ayatollah Khomeini that have continued. The new head of the army, chief of staff of the Iranian army, said recently, he's just in the past week or so, he said, "It's been my lifelong dream to destroy the state of Israel." Lifelong dream. Learned it in school. Learned it as in the Islamic Republic's schools, in the mosques. Even though the Islamic Republic, the Islam is declining in the Islamic Republic, Christianity is growing in the Islamic Republic, but there's still the Islam that says we cannot tolerate a Jewish state on Islamic soil. So looking at the Hamas Charter, The Hamas Charter in 1988, this is formed in 1988, Hamas was formed and came up with this charter, and this is what they say. They talk about the people of the scripture, if they had believed, it says, it would have been better for them, but they've incurred the anger from their Lord. Now, this is straight Quran, and we're going to look at these verses from the Quran later. That's because they used to believe the revelations of Allah and slew the prophets wrongfully. Now, you'll see Jesus say a very similar thing in Matthew 23:31, that you've murdered the prophets. But this is a counter covenant, so it has a totally different meaning to it. It calls on the same thing, and this is how the enemy works. This is how the devil works. He cannot do anything outside of what God has done. Everything that's been set up. So when we talk about in Ephesians chapter 6, it says we fight against powers and principalities and rulers in the dark places. They can only imitate, those powers and principalities can only imitate the real. So in this statement, they're saying that's because they were rebellious and used to transgress. And then it calls on this hadith. It's Al-Imran. And it says, Israel will rise, and it's talking about the last days, and will remain erect until Islam eliminates it as it had eliminated its predecessors. Then it talks about the whole of Islam is burning to do this. This is their heart. This is their spiritual direction. This is their mandate from Allah. And then in Article 7, talking about the universality of Hamas, it talks about the movement, and the prophet, prayer and peace be upon him, said, the time will not come until the Muslims will fight the Jews, until the Jews hide behind rocks and trees, which will cry, O Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him. Now that's in the charter. Now, if you think about what's going on in Gaza and how they continue to fight on, they believe 100% that God is going to come down and save them, that the Ummah, the greater Islamic world, the people of Islam, the other nations of Islam, will come and rescue them, will come and fight their cause from them and free their land, like Husseini said, that they'll get their land back, like the Jordanians said, that this is their land and it belongs to them, and God gave it to them, and they're going to get it back. So as we look on, they say in Article 15 or 8, again, it says, for Hamas, Allah is its goal, the Prophet its model, the Quran its constitution, jihad its path, and death for the case of Allah its most sublime belief. Now again, believing in Allah and dying in battle means that is your salvation. That's your atonement, your own death for Allah. You go straight to heaven. And that is the cause, the flame that keeps them burning. Article 15, the jihad of the liberation of Palestine is an individual obligation. When our enemies usurp some Islamic lands, now here is the root of it, jihad becomes a duty binding on all Muslims. In order to face the usurpation of Palestine by the Jews, we have no escape from raising the banner of jihad. They must fight for the sake of jihad. Dwelling one day in the path of Allah is better than the entire world and everything that exists in it. And then it says this, and this is Al-Bukhari, which is the most important of the hadiths, the commentaries. And it says, I swear by that who holds in his hands the soul of Muhammad, I indeed wish to go to war for the sake of Allah. I will assault and kill assault, and kill. So this is the really important part of what we're seeing in Gaza today, and the self-determination or the continued determination of the Islamic states and organizations, Islamic fundamentalists, let's say, that they must complete this. This is their call to duty. This is their call to action. Like I said, Israel, and this is the side-by-side parallel, Israel's been called back to war. Israel wasn't brought back from the nations to just inhabit the land. It's just like it was in Deuteronomy chapter 8 and 9 before they crossed over, that God was going to go with them to reestablish, or to establish at that point, their tribal inheritance. And now they're brought back to the land again to war to establish or reestablish their tribal inheritance. And who's there to greet them? I believe it's a sleeper cell for 1,400 years that's been waiting for the Jews to come back in order to have conflict, in order to oppose the authority. It goes right back to Genesis chapter 3. We'll talk about that. Again, the foundations of belief. Understanding the Quran talks about their fundamental beliefs about the Jews and complete rejection of the Jewish state. And based on this, and I think we went over this before, but one more time, we have revealed to you, O prophet, this book with the truth as a confirmation of previous scriptures and a supreme authority on them. That means that the old and new covenants, that Isaac being the testimony, being the firstborn, that's trumped by Islam. And Jesus as the firstborn of all creation, trumped by Islam. That everything it says in the Quran you can take for true, and everything it says in the Gospel and the Torah, the Tanakh, the Old Testament, is false. It has to go through the lens of Islam. And when it goes through the lens of Islam, you find the majority of belief in Islam is that Abraham built an altar to sacrifice his firstborn son on Mount Moriah, but it was Ishmael, not Isaac, that God instructed him to sacrifice. And then they come up, when you read some of the arguments, they say, it almost defies logic, because they're saying that Ishmael was born first, and before Isaac was born, Ishmael was, or Abraham was told to take Ishmael to sacrifice, and that's exactly what it doesn't say. So we'll continue to look at this. There's a lot more to go through. And again, I think it's really, it's incumbent on us to understand that if we abide in his word, he'll give us the truth, but we also have to have discernment. And Hebrews 5:14 says, solid food belongs to them who by reason of use can tell or can discern good and evil. We need to be able to discern good and evil. We need to be able to discern what it's saying in the Quran. And there's great people online too, on YouTube, that are doing a fantastic job, like David Wood, Dr. David Wood and Dr. Jay Smith and Sam Shamoun, arguing with Muslims, bringing the truth to Muslims. And they're putting up a good fight. But if you look at, if we look at it and look at it seriously and take these things in mind, we're going to see that it's not only Israel that was brought back to war. And who are we at war with? We're at war with Islam. Well, on American soil, on English soil, on French soil, it's the same. You're at war with Islam because of inheritance. And we'll go more into that more next time. So thanks for watching. And until next time, may the Lord richly bless you. May he make his face to shine upon you and give you peace, his peace. Until next time, shalom.